The views expressed in this podcast are solely those of the podcast host and guest and do not necessarily represent those of our distribution partners, supporting business relationships, or supported audience. Welcome to Transacting Value, where we talk about practical applications for instigating self-worth when dealing with each other and even within ourselves, where we foster a podcast listening experience that lets you hear the power of a value system for managing burnout, establishing boundaries, fostering community, and finding identity. My name is Josh Porthouse. I'm your host, and we are redefining sovereignty of character. This is why values still hold value. This is Transacting Value.
Yes, respect, but it's not just to authority figures, it's respect to all. No matter the age, no matter what they look like, it's just going forth and really emulating how can we treat others with the respect that they deserve just because they're human beings and they're alive.
Today on Transacting Value, how does prioritizing you and your relationship become so important as parents when discovering your own identity? Well, it's complicated. Long distance and estranged relationships seems to be the hallmark of all high-stress occupational marriages. So, how do we embrace for impact? Reesa Marala, owner of Embrace Renewal Therapy, licensed marriage and family therapist, and host of The Real Family Eats, is here to talk all about it. I'm Josh Porthouse, I'm your host, and from SDYT Media, this is Transacting Value. Reesa, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. How about yourself?
I'm good. And first, let me say, I have to assume you've got a busy life. You're a licensed therapist, you're a parent yourself, and you've got your own things you've got to take care of, hobbies, preferences, quiet time, whatever you need. So thanks for lending some of it here to come on the show. I appreciate it.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. Now, you said a couple things before we recorded that I think are really interesting. That, first off, as a parent, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's okay to prioritize yourself over your kids.
100%. In fact, I think it's necessary in order for us to create a thriving family system that I think most parents want for their family, for their life.
Okay. Well, let's qualify this then. How do you define a thriving family system?
So for me, the way that I like to describe it is we're moving out of that survival mode where we're purely reactive to what's happening. We are, thinking things are coming at us and there's really no game plan. There's really nothing in place. And then thriving is moving us to a place where we have a little bit more capacity to actually be present and be enjoying what's happening and enjoying the joy that's happening. So much of parenthood, it's fleeting, it's fast. And if we are in survival mode, we are missing so much of it because we are purely just trying to catch the bullets as they're coming and hope that we can keep up, if you will. And so thriving is really moving us out of that place of just catching bullets and really being able to be in it and to really just soak it all up, because as the minutes pass, any parent out there, gosh, it goes by so fast.
I heard this before and I can't remember who said it, but we basically have 18 years to help raise the next generation. And this is a generic baseline, obviously, but to help raise the next generation to be prepared for the next 80.
Yes.
That's a tall order. So how do you ensure that there's enough time to relax and enjoy the present?
That's a great question, because you're absolutely right. And I think, when you put it in that perspective, I think that's part of the reason why so many parents, we kind of get caught up in that monumental pressure of, oh my goodness, I only have these 18 years to make this really big dent in somebody else's life. And so I need to put everything, all my stuff, all of my issues, I got to put on the back burner because this person is dependent on me and I only have so much time to get it all in there. And so I think that, and I highlight that because it's not coming from a place of trying to shame or say we're doing something wrong. I think it truly comes from this very like internal place of just wanting to help this person be the best that they can be. And so in reality, time is going fast and we are busy as parents, and so some of that is creating boundaries and creating limits of really figuring out, will it be okay if they don't play every single sport underneath the sun? I think they will be if that
Absolutely
allows
not.
us. If that
Yeah.
allows us, though, just one more day in our weekend where we're not having to cart the kids around to an early morning game so that we can sit maybe in our PJs and have some, have a brunch and be able to just enjoy each other, enjoy ourselves, enjoy our relationship with the parent partner. Gosh, I think in the grand scheme of things, it's so worth it.
But now, what about the flip side then of that point, where making time for the kids is the luxury? I mean,
Mm,
for example, I just got off my active duty contract in the Marine Corps about a year ago. And up to that point, I mean, it was 15 years of you guys don't get a say, right? You
yeah.
get an opinion, and we can talk through some of those things when they got old enough, and however any other families address these considerations. But generally speaking, if one of you, or in some cases even both of you, have to contend with some of these military contracts, or your police officers, who else, firefighters, teachers, lawyers,
Mhm,
nurses, doctors, I mean, it's all the same sort of parallel, right? Like, I can't make it to your game this weekend, bud. I got to work.
mhm.
What about then? How do you ensure that there's still inclusivity and some degree of boundaries when you don't necessarily have control over where those boundaries fall?
Yeah. I think some of that is getting creative on what the time that you do have, the time that is available, what that actually looks like, and
Mm.
being intentional about it and prioritizing it. And so some of that is going to, in my experience, at least in the folks that I work with as well, some of that is, maybe it is just a couple minutes of, let's have a dance party. Let's put the phones away. Let's put the devices away. And let's just turn on just a music and just start moving our bodies. I don't have a ton of time, but I can take a couple minutes. And so is that an option where maybe instead of taking the 10-minute toilet break with our phone, we take an 8-minute break and we come out and we just have that couple of minutes of intentional time? Or if they are, let's say they're feeling sad that you have to leave and you are missing one of their games, being able to just that couple minutes, yeah, I am totally feeling sad to you, and getting on their level and relating to that emotion, the connection that we're able to make in that moment can actually do so much more in rebuilding and securing that attachment and that relationship. They don't need us there 100% of the time. Life is real. We've got to put food on the table. And sometimes that includes a job that doesn't provide us the luxury of, tons and tons of time at home. It's making the time that we do have very intentional, very meaningful in the ways that we're connecting with ourselves, with our children, with our partners.
Alrighty, folks, sit tight and we'll be right back on Transacting Value. Are you and your partner feeling more like roommates than soulmates since becoming parents? You're not alone. Parenting is beautiful, but it can also be incredibly challenging on a relationship. Embrace Renewal Therapy and Wellness Collective is here to help. They're the go-to source of support for parent couples who are struggling to reconnect. They offer specialized couples therapy, the invaluable Bringing Baby Home workshop, and other parenting workshops designed to help you navigate the unique challenges of raising a family together. At Embrace Renewal, they believe that investing in yourself and your relationship creates a thriving family system. Guided by love, respect, and kindness, their experienced therapist, Reesa is passionate about helping parents like you rediscover the joy and intimacy in their relationship. At Embrace Renewal Therapy and Wellness Collective, they're supporting parents living like roommates to help get their best friends back. Reignite the spark, reconnect with your partner. Visit embracerenewaltherapy.com today. That's embracerenewaltherapy.com.
It's making the time that we do have very intentional, very meaningful in the ways that we're connecting with ourselves, with our children, with our partners?
Mm. So I grew up in a household that I think I've come to associate as like the Time Lords,
Okay.
where I didn't know any differently than my only two options to exist were either living in the future or living in the past.
Mm,
And there wasn't, for my own perception, at least and perspective, that was the present. That was the norm. Like this is we just worry about what we're doing is going to impact something later and how it can whatever contingency and consideration affect this decision making process. Or but think about everything you've already caused and done and what's happened and so on and so forth. And so the present was this constant state of I don't know, analysis maybe. I don't know. For me, it just didn't quite click that there was any individual singular difference as an identity of presence.
mm,
And so then growing up, I think I adopted that to my own perspective. And then eventually, as a parent, it became my own parenting style because it was, I don't know, it was just what I knew. It didn't even occur to
yeah.
me that there was any difference. So there needed to be a difference.
Mm,
And so there was a handful of medical issues when my son was younger that we had to contend with, but I was deployed. And so my ex-wife was doing it on her own essentially as a single mom. Some support from her family, some support from my family, but like, the ownership, the responsibility was on her. And so the the toll that that took, in addition to a few other things in our case, became irreparable.
yeah.
And then we got divorced, right? And so what about in those circumstances? Like, sure, they can serve these intentional moments, can serve to bring people together as a bonding experience. But like in that instance, I mean, that was an intentional presence out of necessity that actually, based on how things had played out, didn't. It basically pushed us further apart.
Yeah.
So, I mean, is that common? Is that uncommon?
I think that, maybe not in the exact same way that you're talking about, because everybody's a
Yeah.
little bit unique. So to say that, somebody's walking exactly in those shoes, I can't necessarily say that. However, when we have those really trying moments, absolutely, I think that that piece of it's either going to be a catalyst for bringing us closer together, or more common of what I see is really testing that and pushing us further apart. And that's part of the reason, in the work that I do focus and I do allow space so much for the parents, the ones that are doing working so hard to try to support these children, to give them permission essentially to be able to pour back into themselves and pour back into their relationships, because it does allow us a better capacity when these external forces are really trying what's happening inside our family system, and being able to kind of come together versus having us turn away. And so much so that, if we get in that habit of just naturally we're going to turn away, whether it's because for me, what I know is processing, either I'm in the future or I'm in the past. It's really hard for me to kind of be in this moment, in a present way. You know, if that's something that, again, like you said, that's all I know, it can be really hard to kind of go internally. And then our partner, our teammate, who's maybe going to be our only source of support because we don't have a ton of community,
Right.
um, is further away. Even if you're physically away, there's still opportunities that we could turn towards each other emotionally and connect. But sometimes that's not our instinct, when again that gut, or maybe what we know, is kind of turning inwards and, oh, I'll figure it out, I've got to do this kind of alone. And so we don't necessarily share some of those struggles, because there's a fear that if you see how much I'm struggling, you won't want to be with me anyways, or you won't love me, or you won't like the things that I'm thinking. And so that instinct to kind of turn away, because we want to shield that person. Well, when we do that, it by and large ends up tearing us apart and kind of almost reaffirming some of that narrative. And so I think there are opportunities, there are times where maybe we do need to just say, hey, I'm not sure what's going on right now. And I do need a minute to process things alone, or I do need to kind of work through this. I'm here. I want to come back to you. But then in those moments, again, we're allowing some sort of touch together and allowing us to work through some of those things that are really trying.
Yeah. Well, okay.
Did
So
I answer
let's
your
do
question?
this. Yes, yes, yes. So let's do this for obviously everybody who's new to the show, unfamiliar with you, or or your show for that matter. Let's
Yeah.
let's do this. Where did you get this experience from? Take a couple minutes. Who are you? Where are you from? What sort of things are contributing to your passion for this? Why are parents and couples your focus? How did all this come about?
So I grew up in what I would consider now an environment with emotionally immature parents. So there was a lot of, chaos, a lot of abuse in my home. And so that's what I saw. You talk about that's all I know. All I know for me was surviving and figuring out what that was going to look like. How do I protect the younger people that are around me? And so that definitely took a toll on my own well-being just growing up. And this is I'm talking, childhood 0 through 18 kind of deal. And so um I'm the person in that moment. I ended up getting really drawn into theater, musical theater. My undergrad, surprisingly enough, you wouldn't know it, is in musical theater. And so part of that really came, I think, from the chaos that I was living in at home. I was looking for a way to just get some sort of relief, some sort of escape, because I didn't know any better. And for me, I'm looking at it as this is my norm, but this norm feels incredibly uncomfortable and incredibly hurtful and painful. And so, some of my way of surviving was to get, when I was in the theater, I got a break. I got an opportunity to be able to explore different things, have different identities, maybe have a different life that wasn't quite as chaotic as mine, or was chaotic but in a very different way. And so, it allowed me opportunities to maybe see things that I wasn't quite seeing. And then fast forward to the end of my college, my undergrad, I was about to graduate and I got a medical diagnosis that took me out of the game for continuing on with musical theater. And essentially the doctor said, you can't handle that, your body can't. And so I said, oh my goodness, I just spent 4 years of my undergrad earning a degree in something you're telling me I can't do anymore. And
Yeah.
so, I went forward trying to figure out what plan B was. It took me a little bit, but I got there. And I got to a point of figuring out what were some of the things that I really enjoyed about theater as well. And how could I combine that about things about my own life? And so I was very fortunate. In my undergrad, I had access to the on campus counselor who helped really change my life and helped really give me a different perspective. And finally was the first person that told me, hey, what you experienced, that was not. That was not okay. That was not normal. And she just blew my mind because, again, that's all I knew. And so she really helped be a catalyst for my own personal change in my own life. And I really enjoyed one of the other things I really enjoyed, aside from it being a relief for myself or a place that I could go that was kind of safe for me, theater. I also really loved when people afterwards, after the shows, they would come up to me and they would say, gosh, I was having such a really rough day and I was able to come to the theater. And for just those couple of hours, I got to push pause and I got to just take a little bit of that load off. That was so amazing. Thank you so much for providing me that opportunity. And so I started figuring out, well, hey, is there a way for me to combine these two? Combine
Mm.
someone who helped change my life and also still provide some of that relief, but on a longer basis. And so that's what kind of moved me into theater. But for me, what really helped my particular niche that I'm now in supporting couples and parents is that when I became a parent myself, what all the work that I thought I had done, I had gone through my whole grad program, I got tons of therapy myself, and I thought, cool, I know exactly what I'm doing. And then I became a parent myself. And my son also, so my oldest, had some severe high medical needs. At age 3 months, he stopped eating altogether, would not eat at all, not by bottle, not by breast, nothing. Stopped eating. His weight
Oh,
drastically declined. It was a very trying time, and that took so much toll on my own mental wellness, on my relationship wellness. I remember there were periods where I was purely in survival mode, and I would just disassociate in a way that there was nothing there, because that was so much safer than the state that my mind was in. And I thought,
mhm.
gosh, there's not enough support for us as parents, for my relationship in that moment, of someone who really got what it's like as a parent to support us in that way. There was a lot of, postpartum, but mine was, yes, there were some postpartum aspects, but it was purely because of this big catalyst moment that was happening in our life,
Yeah.
that we weren't prepared for, that we hadn't necessarily done that particular work to know how to navigate. And it was in that moment that I said there needs to be more support, and really paying more attention to the couple behind the children, so that we can actually be more prepared to help these thriving human beings, or hopefully thriving future generations.
Wow. And how is your son now?
So he is about to go into middle school this next year.
Hey,
So we've
okay.
made
All
it.
right. Good, 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 good. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Now, then, so you talked about a couple things that I think are important to unpack in a little bit more depth. I mean, first of all, the disassociation. Do you think that was a result of stress, a result of defense mechanism, a necessity just to process at a pace you were more, mature or ready enough to handle? What role do you think that played?
I think for me, it was a little bit of column B and a little bit of column C that you mentioned. The
Mm,
escapism, that's what I had been doing. That's what I knew. Growing up, if we go back to theater, that's why it was my safe place. It gave me an opportunity to escape. I think in those moments, again, when things are really, really dark and it's hard to see a light at the end of the tunnel, that for me, some of that disassociation was, that is so incredibly scary that I have, for my own survival, my own, so I don't completely go off the deep end. Um, I have to just numb out for a little bit and not, you know, think about that. And I think then as a result of that, because I got a little bit of that relief just for that when little tiny moment, it then did allow me an opportunity to start processing, gosh, this is really scary and I don't know what to do, and I'm freaking out here.
Alrighty, folks, if you're looking for more perspective and more podcast, you can check out Transacting Value on Reads Across America Radio. Listen in on iHeartRadio, Odyssey, and TuneIn.
Then as a result of that, because I got a little bit of that relief just for that when little tiny moment, it then did allow me an opportunity to start processing, gosh, this is really scary and I don't know what to do, and I'm freaking out here.
Did you say that out loud?
Not until much later
Yeah.
did I allow
Yeah.
myself the permission to say that out loud.
Yeah, because there's like this, I don't know, it's a thing that happens. Whatever the thing is, it is a thing. Where like once you say it out loud, it's real.
Mhm.
And I think that's when I think that's when one of two things kicks in. One, maybe the fear or the futility or sort of the dark side of the force starts to creep in, or the acceptance, the ownership, the problem framing, maybe problem solving, critical thought, discernment, good side of the force starts to kick in. And I think that's a powerful moment though. And like you said, the permission, like you got to be ready for it.
Mhm.
And if you're not ready, everything just gets more complex or compounds, I think, in this example, more towards the dark side than it does any other more positive outcome. And so, how did you work through it? I mean, you eventually, obviously, got to a point where you could process and work through things and take care of it. But from what I assume, it wasn't like watching the Wiggles on repeat. So, what did it?
I think for me, it was when I did finally start, even just a little bit, saying it out loud, saying, so some of, for me, I can't speak for anybody else, but I know for me, when I was in it, part of my brain is really good at, and I find with a lot of the folks that I work with, our brains can be really good at kind of spinning this narrative that are usually kind of created, archetypes throughout our life, things that we've experienced that kind of create this belief. And so when we're in those really dark moments, to kind of say, hey, I'm freaking out and I have no idea what I'm doing here. One of my big narratives that I was fighting against was I had this idea I had been told numerous times because um, my instinct with some of the things that I'd been through was always to care for other people. I was always kind of the mother in the group, if you will. And so there was that narrative of, oh my goodness, you're going to be such a good mother. And so here
Mm.
all of a sudden, I've got this child who, basic need of eating, of feeding your child, I could not do. And so all of a sudden, if I were to say, I'm freaking out and I don't know what I'm doing here, it would be the complete antithesis of this narrative of, oh my goodness, you'd be such a great mother. And I'd be admitting just this failure. And so for me, that saying out loud, you know, that almost felt like, an admission of that failure. And if you saw that failure, you wouldn't want me to be the mother of your child. Me thinking this about my partner because I can't
Yeah.
even do this basic thing of getting our child fed. And so um, it wasn't really until I was able to have some of that time, have some of that support of just of seeing that I was doing at that moment the best that I could do with what I had. And allowing myself just a little bit of that grace, a little bit of that self compassion to say, maybe this voice inside that's telling me I'm this horrible person isn't right. And let me test it out. And so I would say just a little bit of the thoughts that were happening in my head. And it was each time that I said that and I was able to be received by my partner, not with that judgmental, that, ness that my head was convincing me was going to happen. And a little bit at a time, I was able to replace some of that narrative by my own self-compassion for myself and by seeing some of that compassion come at me from some of the people that were around, whether that be from my partner or some of the people that were in my community, that
Mm.
those really loud voices weren't were telling me lies at that point, even though I was convinced they were telling me truths.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you suppose that's based on? Because it wasn't until hindsight when, like you just said, it actually wasn't true.
Yeah.
But in the present moment, it was, or at least it seemed that way, right? So, was that what pattern do you think? Well, the archetypes that you mentioned were rooted in.
I think honestly it is rooted in what I find for most people in our brain's way of trying to protect us in some way, shape, or form. Because again, if I were in situations in the past, which I was, where some of those narratives were fed, even if it was just a little bit, even if it wasn't intentional, it was this idea was placed in front of me that, hey, if you can't live up to it. And again, I know for me personally, because of some of the abusive natures in my home, that was some of the narrative that if I didn't do things exactly the right way, in the perfect way, there was really dire consequences. And so then
Mm.
there became that very rigid either I'm perfect or I'm not. And if I'm not perfect, that has a ton of consequences. That's what was fed. And so then each time as I continue to live life for me, that monster, if I mess up even just a little bit and there was someone who was maybe frustrated with me, I took that instead of just saying, they feel frustrated and they're completely entitled to their frustration. My monster who is already building, who is already growing goes, see, there you go. They're not happy. There's the consequences. So now I just fed that monster. It gets even bigger. And so as we continue and as we continue to filter our life through that lens, it gets stronger and stronger and stronger. So then when you do reach these points where it's really challenging, our brain, it's trying to protect us. It doesn't want us to fail. So then it says, okay, go inside yourself, or here, pull away, or here, do these things. Because if we don't let people see that you're failing, they'll stay. And we want so desperately for you to have someone in your life stay. So here we're going to do these other things, these pull aways or this withdrawing, because if I withdraw, then they won't get to see that. And then they won't leave me. They'll stay. Maybe they'll stay. And so I think for many people, it comes from our brain, again, in some way, shape, or form, trying to protect us. The way that it's going about, though, is kind of creating these really loud voices that, hey, if you don't do it this way, this other way, it's going to cause a lot of heartache. And so it makes the voices louder. And so it makes it truths by that point, because it's so well fed.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what it sounds like for sure. Now, saying that though, I have a working theory that where our identity is generally grounded, despite all of the chaos and the whirlwind of emotions and circumstance and everything that can make our lives a bit more complex, a lot more complex, is our character and our value systems that ground our character. And I think our values are sort of a shortcut to identity, but it also helps us identify how we want to then take ownership and consciously transact our cognition into our behaviors, into our actions, to then repeat the cycle and reinforce some positivity and so on. I think the values are the torque in that process. And so this is a segment of the show called Developing Character.
Developing character.
And it's two questions, not to blindside you here, but answer them as vulnerably or authentic as you want. It's up to you. But it's about your value systems, because it's such a cool phenomenon, I think, that you're describing right now, that despite all of the trauma or setbacks or any and every aspect growing up of your perspective, you still turned out like this, able to handle and rely on yourself and be proud and find joy despite all those things. So my first question is, rooted in the past, what were some of the values then that you were actually raised on or that you remember being brought up around?
Hmm. In the past, I probably would say those values look somewhere along the lines of um, respecting authority. And in that aspect, it was, the parents, or, and especially in the way that I was brought up, the church, that was a big authority. And I would also maybe say kind of this, I don't know that it was necessarily something that was passed down to me. However, it was something I think was rewarded in me, is the people pleasing, is a value of pleasing others.
Okay. And then over time, I mean, now a few decades later at least, you've learned, you've grown, you've experienced, and whether or not those have stayed there on some level or scale or scope, I'm sure they've been influenced to some degree. So, what about now? What are some of your
Yeah.
values presently then?
So I think the best way to describe my values is what I ask my children to go forth in their day every single day. In the morning, when I drop them off at school, I ask them, please use kindness, love, and respect. And I think those are the three things that really outline my current values. It's that, yes, respect, but it's not just to authority figures, it's respect to all, no matter the age, no matter what they look like. It's just going forth and really emulating how can we treat others with the respect that they deserve just because they're human beings and they're alive. And what does it look like to treat someone with just complete, unconditional love and kindness, and doing it as well. I think the biggest lesson I've had to learn is doing it to myself as well, is treating
Oof.
myself with the same unconditional love and kindness as others.
Alrighty, folks, sit tight and we'll be right back on Transacting Value. Tampa Bay. Sun-kissed beaches, a thriving arts scene, and a community that embraces diversity. It's more than just a place to live, it's a lifestyle. At Porthouse Tampa Bay Realtor, I understand that finding the right home is about more than just square footage. It's about finding the right character, culture, and community. It's about finding a place where you can truly belong. Alongside a network of experienced marketers, inspectors, realtors, and lenders, we're not just experts in the Tampa Bay market. We are your neighbors, and we're passionate about helping you find the perfect place to call home. Follow along on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Porthouse Tampa Bay Realtor. Porthouse Tampa Bay Realtor, where values start in the home.
I think the biggest lesson I've had to learn is doing it to myself as well, is treating myself with the same unconditional love and kindness as others.
Yeah, that's uphill some days.
Yes.
That's difficult. That's a lot. And, not for nothing, though. I think some days that's uphill just because we lack the awareness. Like, I
Mhm.
thought I was treating myself pretty good. I slept in. I took a shower this morning. I worked out. I had some coffee. I even ate breakfast this morning. It's a pretty good day for me. Meanwhile, the whole time you're like, God, I wasted all that time when I could have been doing other things, or and you just beat yourself down unwittingly.
Yeah.
And I think that self awareness is difficult to come by. So when you're talking about respecting authority, for example, or even just pleasing other people, let alone loving people and being kind and respecting other people, are they always good? The impacts, the implications of these values, do you think, or understanding these values and having an awareness of them? Can it be bad? Should we strive to change them? Should we just accept them and see how we apply them in the future? I mean, what role have they had for you overall?
I think that inherently, values are there again as a way to try to guide us in some way, shape, or form. Are they sometimes maybe um, given to us in a way that doesn't serve the end goal that we want for ourselves, that we want for our family systems? I think that's where some of that flexing and maybe what that value looks like can
Mm,
happen. That's probably one of the number one things I talk about with my couples is, are there ways that we can get creative? Because sometimes, again, if we look at, for example, the people pleasing one, could that look like, if I'm making sure that everybody is happy and everybody is pleased, is that indeed me treating them with love and kindness? Well, yes, to some degree, maybe some of them are the same. However, it's not necessarily treating myself with love and kindness. So, are there ways that I can still be in alignment with that love and that kindness while also making sure to balance myself in there as well? And so, sometimes that does mean saying no to that extra commitment, because in that moment, if I continue to say yes, I'm a person, again, I've got that instinct to people please. So I have that
mhm.
instinct to say yes to everything. That's going to be treating them with kindness. They need me to go above and beyond and to exert myself way beyond my capacity. At the same time, it leaves me without a whole lot of love for myself and a lot less kindness for myself, also my family, because when I'm at my max capacity and I have nothing left, the likelihood that I'm treating others, especially the people that are closest to me, with all the love and kindness that I know I'm capable of drastically decreases. And so now at
Yeah.
that moment, are there ways that I can get creative of how can I move forward and still showing them love that, hey, I'm here, I'm still showing up for you, I want to support you. There might be some limits onto what that looks like. I can't give you 24/7 of my time. Maybe I can get creative on giving you an hour, and that is still me giving to you. It's just
Mm.
getting a little bit creative on what it looks like.
Yeah. Fostering that understanding, I guess, helps too, because then you have to communicate it,
Mhm. Yes.
especially if the pattern is, the first 18 years, your time is your parents, basically.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like you're doing what you're doing, but they're allowing you to do it. So it's not quite the same, right? But then when you get a bit older, you maybe haven't changed much, but you got to communicate it to people that the you they think you are may not be the you who you actually are as you
Mhm.
gain self awareness and respect for yourself and whatever applies. That communication, I think, is tricky. So, how do you do it? I mean, you work with couples all the time where one party neglects the other, neglects themselves, both neglect each other, and themselves. Like, how do you bridge that? Working on the communication, the egos, the resilience, everything. What's the strategy to work on communication then?
So I like to use, especially when we're starting out, a formula, if you will.
Hmm.
And it starts with an I feel, and we're putting it in an emotion word. Because again, when we start sentences, so much of our tendency is to say what we're noticing the other person isn't doing, how they're not showing up for us in that
Hmm.
moment in time. So we usually start the sentences with you. And most people's instincts, the minute they hear the word you come out of their someone else's mouth, is like, let me get ready to fight. And they put their hands up and they're getting ready to go to war. And
Yeah.
so really it's finding ways to start your sentences and really owning what you're feeling in that moment and not going with the you made me feel. So many of us, we go, oh, you made me feel sad. Well, one, that gives away so much of your power. And then two, let's take some ownership and some responsibility, validate ourselves by saying, this is the emotional experience that I'm having. And guess what? It's okay for me to feel these things. So we're starting with I feel, and we add an emotion word as many emotions as you can name. And the more that we name them, they grow a little bit smaller. They have a little less overpowering power over us. And then we follow
Mm.
it about what? And we stick with the facts. I think as a society, we're so good at the flavorful words, is what I like to call them, of, peppering in our opinion on somebody else's behaviors instead of just going with the facts that you could take into a room, take a cue from the lawyers. You want to go in there with facts that all jurors are going to be in agreement. That's what happened. But the minute we start adding like peppering it with those flavorful words of, you slammed a door or you yelled at so and so, that's now someone's opinion that people can disagree. Is that really what yelling is? Is that really what slam the door is? I
Yep.
mean, talk about talking with teenagers, they're going to pull apart every bit of our sentences. So just sticking with those facts and then really following it up with the I needs. Really digging down deep. What is it that you need in the moment? And it's not a need of like, I need you to just stop it, right? Because again, we want someone to receive us and what we're saying. But really, I need to feel loved, or I'd love to feel seen in this moment. And then ending it with what it would look like if that need was met. Because again, I could go up
Mm.
to someone and say, hey, I need to feel loved. And the person looking at me is going, what do you think I've been doing? Because their version of love looks different than mine. And
Mhm.
so now we're missing each other again. And so instead, not only am I going to own what my needs are, but I'm going to tell you, I'm going to give you a roadmap on exactly how to meet them in a way that lands for me as, oh gosh, my needs are met. And then all of a sudden, we've set our partner up for success in meeting our needs because we just gave them a map, a literal map, and here's how to go from point A to point B. And they're like, cool, now I have something to work with. Great, thank you. And then we've just set ourselves up for success because it increases the chance that our needs are going to get met drastically.
Mm. And then, though, I'm sure you also run into people, and I see them all the time as well. Reesa, I'm not doing that. That's dumb. I've been with them for a decade. They should know me by now well enough. It's fine. I don't need to. I don't need to talk that way, or I'm not going to say that. I feel like that's dumb. I'm a man. Okay, I don't have to talk about that. Right? That stuff happens all the time.
Oh, yeah.
So, but you're saying I feel frustrated about you saying these things may not be as inflammatory as I feel frustrated when you do these things, right? So
Mhm.
the about makes the difference.
It's the about and it's the facts. So if you're
Okay.
going to say what someone else said, it's verbatim. You said da 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 da. There's no
Mm,
extra, words added to it. We're not doing a summary of what we think they said. We're doing actual facts. This is exactly what happened. Like if it's a text message, it's quite literally verbatim that text message, right? We're not adding anything else to it because then no one can refute that, okay, yeah, that happened.
well, I've had attorneys try to play. We'll see. But okay, let's say you can't refute text. But yeah,
Well,
no.
it's
So
harder,
right.
I should say. Not that you can't,
Okay.
it's harder.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So yeah, I feel frustrated about this particular issue. I need what? I need you to understand better because you never listen to what I'm saying. That's probably not what you mean.
Yeah, in that instance, I would love to feel understood, or I'd
Got
like
it.
to feel
Okay.
understood. And when I feel understood, it looks like this. And then we give them that roadmap. Maybe it's the eye contact, or maybe it's the validation. I hear you. Or, hey, I can appreciate where you're coming from. And now we've
Oh,
given them steps on how to say, on how to receive us in an understood way.
okay. So I'm identifying here there's different levels to this conversation because it sounds like exactly the same words when you're both really angry and
Mhm.
that makes it worse. But if you use exactly these same words when both people are at a zero sort of normal baseline, you can actually make some progress.
It does absolutely. So I think you made a really great point of making sure that both parties are in the capacity to be able to have a conversation.
Yeah.
Because if we're pushing and one or both of you are emotionally flooded, nothing's coming in. In fact, there's plenty of research to show that our frontal lobe that does our logic and our rational thinking is offline. And
Mm.
so if you're flooded, yeah, most people need a minimum of 20 minutes of active self soothing. I'm not talking doom scrolling avoidance, I'm talking active self soothing
Yeah.
to be able to actually come down from a place of flooding and have their frontal lobe online. So you don't necessarily have to be at a zero for us to now use this formula. But we can't be kind of higher than a 5 in that moment. It's not going to be productive no matter what you say.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I think, actually, for the sake of time, this is probably one of my last two questions. But so I think then what's important here to note is it is possible to work through some of these things, even when the stressors are ridiculous, that you don't need to lose yourself in the process. Even if you lose yourself in the moment, it's recoverable as a couple, as an individual, not, not the end.
100%. Repair attempts are always welcome.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And so then what kind of process, I guess, do you use or do you recommend now having heard the impact some of your values have had on your perspective and your process and your growth and recovery throughout this whole process, let alone for your family and your partner and everybody else involved? What is your process, do you think, to actually transact your values into sort of a physical space or behavioral space and get some resonance out of them and find some meaning in them or clarity or purpose in them?
Yeah. So for me, um, it takes a lot of self-reflection. I probably can't tell you the number of times I'm self-reflecting to try to really beef up my insight and my awareness of myself and how I'm moving about throughout the day. And I'm an internal processor, so I do that all in my brain. I'm not a talk it out kind of person. That's a growth pain, if you will, that my partner and I had to go through because he's very much an external processor. And I get overwhelmed by lots of words coming at me. So I'm a person who I'm internally processing fairly frequently throughout the day. And it's also for me, my process is taking ownership for me of the things that, maybe I didn't do as great as I could have, as I know I have the capability, and taking a little bit of not a little bit, taking a lot of ownership of that, rather, really, and then also doing it though from a compassionate way. That takes a lot of work, as we talked about. I'm really good at highlighting my critiquing myself, if you will. And so it's really practicing some of that self-compassion. And then also, if there's opportunities for me to make those repair attempts, coming back, having some of the humility and love for those other people and being able to say, hey, you know what, this didn't quite align with me. And if I have an answer, then maybe I'll give them, some of my thoughts on how I'm going to be working moving forward. If I don't, being able to workshop that, even if it's with my children. I can't tell you the number of times I've gone with my children, be like, I am learning this too. And so I did not do that to the best of my capacity, and that you deserve so much more. I don't know if I know exactly how to do this right. Do you have some thoughts on what would work best for you? And we sit there and we collaborate on it. And so for me, one of the ways, again, that I kind of try to move towards that value system is really having that open dialogue, being able to know that it's okay for me to say, I don't quite know what I'm doing here. It's not aligning. I know something's off. I don't know if I quite know how to fix it, and using some of those people around me to help me workshop it so that I can be able to try it again tomorrow and try my best to just show up in those ways, in the love, in the kindness, in the respect for everybody. And there are days that I don't get it right. And I make the apologies, and I make it with an actionable apology, not just the words, but really showing up and trying it again.
Yeah. Oh, that's important too. Yeah, like you said, grace goes a long way.
Yeah.
So, okay, before we get out of here, if people want to find more out about your show, get in touch with you as clients, find out about any more information or resources, can you walk us through in a couple minutes about the Real Family Eats and where people can go to get in touch with you and find some of these resources?
Absolutely. So, The Real Family Eats, you can find us on YouTube, on all major podcasting platforms. There's the audio as well. Or if you're a visual person, there's the YouTube where you can see us. And again, as you mentioned at the beginning, it's real parents. We are getting rid of that perfect parent kind of facade that society likes to put out there. We're talking about real struggles, figuring out, and really normalizing that this thing is hard. It's really hard, and try to help people feel a little less alone in it. At the same time, bonus, the guests that are on my show, they're teaching me a favorite recipe, one that they've tried that they love. And so other parents can add to their repertoire, because we're busy parents. Sometimes it's trying to think of what we're having for dinner, or what we're going to make is just one more thing to our really long list. So instead, you can have somebody else say, hey, this is really good, why don't you try it tonight? So you don't have to think about that anymore. And again, that's under The Real Family Eats. And any of my other services you can find on embracerenewaltherapy.com. And if you're in the state of California, or want to come down to the state of California for a weekend, I do provide couples therapy intensives and couples therapy weekly as well, depending on where you're at. And then I do have workshops that I offer, and those some of those are virtual, so they can be for anybody worldwide pretty much. And that can all be found on my website.
Cool. Cool. And also for anybody who's new to our show, you can go to transactingvaluepodcast.com, or whatever player you're streaming this conversation on, click see more, click show more, and in the show notes description of this conversation, you'll see links to The Real Family Eats and obviously Reesa's website at Embrace Renewal Therapy as well. I love it. I love what you're doing. I love your message. I really appreciate the opportunity to help showcase it and make people more aware of it. So, like I said in the beginning, I appreciate your time. But now that the conversation's over, I appreciate your perspective as well. That was awesome. So, thank you.
Yes, thank you so much again for having me. I appreciated it very much.
Absolutely. And to everybody else, thank you guys for tuning into our show. Like I said, if you want to hear more about this conversation or any of our other conversations, go to transactingvaluepodcast.com. On the top right corner of the homepage, you can click leave a voicemail. That's 2 minutes of time to you. Leave an audio file. Let us know what you think of the show. But more importantly, right now, let Reesa know what you think about her message. Give her some feedback, guys. Drop us a voicemail. We'll forward it on to her and get everybody in touch. And you guys can also learn how to better transact some of the values she talked about as well. I love it. I appreciate your time. Everybody listening and watching this show, I appreciate you guys tuning in as well. But until next time, that was Transacting Value.
Thank you to our show partners. And folks, thank you for tuning in and appreciating our value as we all grow through life together. To check out our other conversations, or even to contribute through feedback, follows, time, money, or talent, and to let us know what you think of the show, please leave a review on our website, transactingvaluepodcast.com. We also stream new episodes every Monday at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time through all of your favorite podcasting platforms like Spotify, iHeart, and TuneIn. You can now hear Transacting Value on Reads Across America Radio Eastern Standard Time, Wednesdays at 5 p.m., Sundays at noon, and Thursdays at 1 a.m. Head to readsacrossAmerica.org/transactingvalue to sponsor a wreath and remember, honor, and teach the value of freedom for future generations. On behalf of our team and our global ambassadors, as you all strive to establish clarity and purpose, ensure social tranquility, and secure the blessings of liberty or individual sovereignty of character for yourselves and your posterity, we will continue instigating self-worth, and we'll meet you there. Until next time, that was Transacting Value.